Hey guys, it's Vince and Drew with Power 5 Fanatics. We're back at you in the middle of the week, getting ready to head into week 3 of college football. So, got some good matchups this week, but we wanted to reflect back on week 2, and we got 4 takeaways pretty much for the entire season so far. So, we're going to share those with you. Definitely has been some surprise teams, which there is every year, and this year. There's a couple of them that really kind of came out of nowhere, and they look like they, might even really be contenders for their respective conferences. The Big Ten just overall has been really, I wouldn't say just surprising. They kind of have.
Offensively, they kind of have been.
Yeah, I mean, we knew they were going to be good, but they seemed better than we thought. And there's
and
a couple.
The defenses there's some great defenses as well in that conference.
First team, Maryland. They deserve to be brought up mainly just because of their offense. It's just been out of this world. McFarland, their running back's big playmaker. It looks like he may be NFL quality.
We knew that they were going to have a pretty good offense, but it looks like Mike Loxley was a little bit more of a big deal at Alabama than we thought. Of course, he teamed up with Josh Gaddis there, who went to Michigan. But now he's brought that to Maryland, and it looks like he's the real deal, at least from what we've seen through 2 weeks. I mean, the offense has been explosive. I'm still a little bit worried about the defense. How are they going to hold up against some of the higher-end talented teams in the Big Ten? But as far as putting up points, they're doing that. So they're
they really look good. They just destroyed Syracuse this last week.
Right.
Wisconsin's the other Big Ten school we want to bring up, and it was more for their defense. They haven't given up a point this year. It's hard to beat a team if you can't score, and people are having a hard time scoring on Wisconsin.
I heard a very interesting stat about the Wisconsin dominance through the first 2 weeks, and to put this in perspective on how badly they're beating teams. Like we said in the other videos we've made this week, they've outscored their opponents 110-0. That hasn't happened in the Big Ten in the AP poll since I think it was 1939.
Wow.
That's how dominant they've been through these first 2 weeks. There's never been another team in the Big Ten since then who's had such a dominant performance.
In the first 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So
they're just look like they, could definitely challenge for the Big Ten title. There's just a lot of teams in the Big Ten right now that are good, and we'll get to that here in a minute.
Yeah.
Then we got another Power 5 school, North Carolina, and I know a lot of Mac Brown fans here in Texas where we live. They're pulling for him and back at his old program.
Right.
And he's doing it maybe with smoke and mirrors a little bit, just because he's got a freshman quarterback, and they're just doing what they got to do to win the games.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming into the season, we all kind of thought that Mac Brown would, maybe be able to right this ship, but also maybe be a bridge between the coaching now until maybe they get a big time hire here in 3 or 4 years or whatever. But at least through what we've seen so far, it appears that Mac might not just be a bridge. He might be like the answer, you know.
I'd say they're either the 3rd or 4th best team in the ACC right now.
Yeah, and the ACC.
That may not be saying a whole lot in the big scheme of things, but they're not the 5th or 6th best team.
They're finding ways to win these games.
Yeah, they really are.
I know last week Miami missed I think a couple field goals and an extra point that obviously would have gotten them that win against North Carolina, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah. At the end of the day, a win is a win is a win,
W's.
And they won. So
and then we got one Group of 5 squad, Hawaii, and they're going to have their biggest challenge this week. They play at Washington, and that's going to be a very big challenge. If they win that, I mean, they're definitely top 25 on any poll you're going to look at.
Yeah.
And they've been really impressive. They beat Arizona was that a week 0 game?
Week 0.
And I think Hawaii had 5 turnovers, and then they still won the game against Arizona.
I think they had 5 interceptions and then 2 fumbles, so 7
they had
turnovers.
Anyway, that's amazing. That just tells you something right there. Of course, they were playing at home, which helped, but still, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And they've definitely have been a surprise.
Yeah, they kind of started off this way last year too. I believe they went 4-0, maybe 5-0 last year as well, and they were also surprised last year. So we'll see if they can continue.
Yeah, we'll
this
see if they're on our
upward
surprise team
trajectory.
list as we go on
Right,
here.
but as of right now, I mean, they've
would
been
say
impressive and they've been scrappy. So
So that was our first takeaway. Takeaway 2, freshman quarterbacks producing, and there have been quite a few. And
Right.
I think there's a theme to this. In years past, it was harder for a true freshman to come in and actually produce or excel. And it's kind of funny because you're also seeing it at the NFL level. You're seeing these quarterbacks come in more often than not. They're actually working out as rookies or long term. You know, it used to be in the NFL, you know, you might have one quarterback out of 4 in the first round actually, you know, becomes a franchise quarterback. Now you're seeing maybe 2 or 3 out of 4 will do that. And I think it's a trend there that starts in high school programs.
Yeah.
They're much more polished when they get to college.
Yeah.
And I think it's reflected now, and it's probably going to continue to be that way. We got a few names here. Bo Nix with Auburn.
Yeah.
You know, he had that big win week 1, which looks better all the time against Oregon. And
hasn't been super impressive, but it's kind of hard for some of these guys to make that transition. But the guy came in college ready from high school, like Vince was saying, and he's found ways. He found a way to get that ball to the wide receiver against Oregon, and then they
what was that, like
a
as well. Last second play?
Yeah,
I believe so. And then we got Arizona State. Jaden Daniels looked a lot better week 1 than he did week 2, but they still won.
Yeah.
And he's got his big challenge this week.
Right.
They play at Michigan State,
which
is a huge challenge because Michigan State's defense is maybe one of the better
ones. Their front
ones.
7 is exactly who will be impacting this game, I believe. And
I think he's going to have it's going to be almost like an NFL defensive line. That he's going against. So good luck, Jaden. Hey, we think you're doing pretty good though, and so far so good with Jaden Daniels at Arizona State. And then we got Sam Howell. Speaking of North Carolina, and he's a big reason Mac's 2-0.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this guy, he one of these highly touted 4-stars that I believe Mac Brown, when he got hired, he stole away from Miami. Miami wanted this guy too, I believe. And like Vince was saying, we'll see if this thing going on with North Carolina is a little bit smoke and mirrors because they do have a lot of youth. But this guy's talented.
The thing they got going for them is they're in a weaker conference, in my opinion. So I know they're going to play Clemson at some point this year. At least I think they're playing Clemson. I'm not positive sure, but if they are, that's going to be their biggest challenge. That and Virginia, of course.
Right.
If they play Virginia, I would say Virginia's probably the second best team there. But so they do have some challenges. Of course, every week's a challenge in Power 5 conferences. And the last one's Hank Bachmeyer, Boise State.
Right.
He's the one that made the terrific play against
Florida State.
That was Florida State in week 1, yeah. And they're 2-0.
Yeah.
And looking pretty good.
Beat Marshall last week. The offense wasn't super inspired or didn't look to be super inspired. But, again, these guys are having to come in as, true freshmen and actually lead their team to victory. And they're able to – they're just coming in more prepared now than they ever have been.
Yeah.
You look back at some of these teams.
They're playing football all year round, and usually they're just playing one sport in high school now.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and they're all these quarterback camps and things that kids go through. But
right.
Anyways, my opinion, Boise State's the second best group of 5 team.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good with a freshman quarterback. Our third takeaway after week 2 are the Big 12 defenses. Look like they're trending upwards.
Right.
In particular, there's 3 teams. Oklahoma, they've still given up some points, but the first half in week 1, they looked really good. And then they started giving up some big plays later on. It was University of Houston, I believe.
Right.
And they continued last week. I can't remember who they played. It wasn't the talent.
Was it South Dakota or
Yes, I think it was. It wasn't South Dakota State. It was just South Dakota. So the talent wasn't there, but still they looked really good. And that's all you can go by this early in the season.
Right.
And I know they do have a couple playmakers on that side of the ball. One or two guys on the defensive line, and then they got their stud linebacker.
Yeah, Kenneth Murray.
Yeah. So looks better for Oklahoma. We'll see. Texas Tech's another one. They've only given up 13 points the entire year. Again, talent that they're playing, you have to put that in perspective, but still, that's not much. I think they're only giving up 220 yards a game, and
I think Kansas has had a pretty good defense.
Yeah, I think Kansas has looked pretty
Kansas'
good too.
biggest issue is their offense.
Yeah.
Their offense is
I
just
agree.
not able to move the ball, but the defense is not
Kansas,
the reason they're losing games.
And Kansas State was the other team also.
Kansas State and like Vince was saying, I mean, I really
Of course,
think
TCU looks like they're
TCU,
always pretty decent.
Texas, Iowa State, those teams, have kind of been
Yeah, we hadn't seen enough of Iowa State, but
some pretty good defenses in the past years. But I really think this change of philosophy in the Big 12 is coming because of the influx of new coaching.
there's almost half the schools have.
I mean,
a new coach.
40% of the 10 teams in the Big 12 have gotten a new coach over the offseason. West Virginia, K-State, Kansas, and Texas Tech all got a new coach. And it seems like a lot of these coaches are bringing in the philosophy of we want to play great offense, but we also want to play great defense.
Yeah.
And people are learning how to defend those types of Big
I
12
agree.
I
think that's a big, and they're finally starting to get a few players too,
Right.
Without a doubt. And our last takeaway after week 2 is the how we're going to rank the conferences.
Right, or updated conference rankings.
Right. There's only been one change from last week. At the top, it's going to stay the same with us. We think the Big Ten's the best conference. We may be.
It's very close.
We may be one of the few people on planet Earth,
Yeah.
but we think Big Ten's better than the SEC.
At least as of right now, it is really close because I think the SEC is more top-heavy than the Big Ten. But when we're talking about a conference, we're talking about all the teams.
Top to bottom, they look really good.
And
The Big Ten. The only school that's looking weak, I say really weak right now, might be Rutgers. But
every conference has that team.
I know. And but other teams are looking good. I mean, even Indiana's looking good, and they play Ohio State this week. Illinois is looking pretty decent. Northwestern, okay.
Minnesota's finding ways to win. Wisconsin and Maryland are two of our surprise teams.
Yeah.
I mean, when you start getting some surprise teams in there,
And then you still have your heavyweights at the top. So
Yeah.
we're ranking them number 1. We got SEC 2, like Drew said.
and Penn State too.
Right.
I mean, they're always going to be pretty good, but
We got SEC 2. Again, we think it's heavier on the top side than
Not
the Big
quite
Ten,
as
but
thick.
not as deep, definitely. But still very good. I mean, they beat UT this week. LSU did. And then we got the Big 12 in the middle there, number 3. Again, they're pretty good. Then in the middle also, I'm talking about there's about 6 schools that I'm not, we're not real sure where they
it's gonna
stand,
pan
but
out,
they seem to be right there in the middle where a couple of them could even
make a jump as a dark horse.
against UT
potentially,
and
or-
Oklahoma. I'm talking about Tech, Baylor, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and TCU. I'd say those 5. We're not real sure where they're at, but we know they're not terrible teams, and any one of those, might even challenge for the Big 12.
Yeah. And with the emergence of Texas, really, they're kind of turning into a little bit of a national type of power as far as the way they're recruiting and the way that they're competing with these other
Definitely,
national powers.
UT is better than they've been, and Oklahoma is just strong as they've ever been, in my opinion.
It definitely improves the perception overall of the Big 12. So we got them ranked number 3.
4, here's our change. We got the Pac-12 moving above the ACC, which, it's just the way it is. I mean, if you look top to bottom, the Pac-12 is better than the ACC.
Right.
The ACC has Clemson, and there's a huge drop-off in
Oh, yeah.
talent after that. But the Pac-12 is moving upwards, and the ACC is moving downwards right now. And in my opinion, the Pac-12 is better. It's just schools like, of course, Washington State's hanging in there. Washington's still there.
Oregon,
USC,
Utah,
USL's hanging in there.
USC,
Arizona State, and then you get to the ACC, and it's just Syracuse losing as bad as they did to Maryland really hurt the perception there some. I know Clemson beat A&M, but I think most people figure they were probably going to win that game. And Miami and Florida State, I don't know what to think
As of
about.
right now, they're not as good, in my opinion, at number 2 as what the Pac-12
I think
has
the best team
number
after
3,
Clemson
4,
is probably
5,
Virginia.
and maybe on. So,
So that after Clemson, I wouldn't say that conference is up in the air because it's far from that. It's going to be Clemson winning that conference. But if you want to say who's going to be waving the second place flag, that is up in the air big time. And so there's no telling what's going to happen there. It's just there's a lack of, I don't know what it is. It just seems to be a talent.
Just a huge cavern
Yeah.
of, the Clemson is, they're one of these very national power,
Right.
highly respected. But then below that, there's not a whole lot of other highly competitive contenders,
Right.
to challenge Clemson.
So we got them last. We're probably the only people that have the ACC, the weakest conference, but that's where we got them at.
Yeah.
Well, guys, hey, thanks for staying with us. We'll be talking to you here in the next few weeks. This week 3 coming up is going to
Cannot wait for this next week.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting because things are really going to start panning out a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, because we're starting to get some conference
Right.
play, and we're starting to get even teams like, for instance, Hawaii and Washington, big game. Iowa State, another big game. So there's some really good.
Not as many marquee games
No, but
as there
some
was
really-
last week, but a lot of teams that kind of give us a good feel of
Idea.
what college football, the landscape of college football is going to look like this year.
Exactly. Well, we appreciate it, and make sure you subscribe, like, share, hit the bell notification, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yep. Catch
Thanks.
us later. Thanks.